Hello and welcome to polyplane.com. In this pre-flight tutorial, we're going to be talking about navigation within 3D space. So, what is navigation in 3D space? Now, if you've ever used any sort of imaging software like Photoshop or GIMP or Illustrator or Painter, you've probably had to move around on your canvas somehow. You've either had to zoom in or pan around to look at details. The same thing's true in 3D space. You've got to do the same exact thing. You've got to move around, rotate around your object to see details that you wouldn't otherwise see. So to get a understanding of this, you experience this on a day-to-day basis. You just haven't realized it. Stand up away from your chair and walk towards your wall. Now walk back away from that wall. You've, in essence, zoomed in on that wall as far as a computer would understand it. Now walk side to side. Same thing as panning. It's very simple. But when you pick up something off of your desk and you start looking all around it, you're actually orbiting around it. Now your eyes are locked into your head, obviously. So in a computer program, you do this through the means of a camera. In the Rhino workspace, by default, you have a top navigation bar. Within that top navigation bar are a series of navigational controls. They include pan, rotate, zoom, zoom to a window, zoom to the extents of your document, and zoom selected. I've assembled a stack of shapes here to help us understand how to navigate through the navigation. If you click on the hand, it's very similar to what you would do in Photoshop of panning a document, where you can move it to the right or you can move it to the left. Now notice when I said move it to the right, the shape's actually moved left. The reason is you're not actually moving the document around. You're moving a three-dimensional camera that's looking through the scene. So I'm going to move the camera to the right and the scene will shift left and vice versa. Next is the rotate view. This is probably the most handy of the tools that you'll use because it allows you to really see the dimensionality of whatever you're working on. You click somewhere on your document and drag, and the camera will move all around. Zoom is just as it sounds. When you zoom in or click on the button and drag up or forward with your mouse, you move in towards the scene. And likewise, when you pull away, you zoom out. For the next tool, zoom window, if I click and drag out a window, it actually zooms me into that window space. This is actually really handy for looking at tight details that you might not otherwise see. The next one over is zoom extents. So this is very handy if, say, you're zoomed out way, way far and you want to see exactly what's in your scene that's visible. You can click on the zoom extents tool and it'll bring everything right back with a nice little bit of padding at top and bottom, left and right. The zoom selected tool is just as it sounds. If I select on the sphere here and I click on zoom selected, it'll zoom in to that which is selected. And you also have a little button up here which is kind of handy too, which is your undo view change. So say I didn't want to zoom in on that, I can just click on that and it'll bring me back out to my last view. These are the basic navigation tools that you'll use from day to day in Rhino. Next, I'd like to talk about the hotkeys that you can use to also navigate your scene. So if you hold Shift and right click, that actually pans your document. Likewise, if you hit Control and right click, you'll be able to zoom in and out. You'll notice wherever my mouse is and I click and drag and zoom in, that's where it zooms in. So if I hold Control and I right click and drag on the sphere, it's going to zoom into the sphere. This is very good to know in case you're way out here again and you know your object is somewhere around there. So if you put your cursor over there, click and drag, it'll bring it right into that space so it's easier to navigate. Finally is the orbit tool. This is really handy because it's just the right mouse button and it allows you to zoom around the scene. Now I'd like to give you some practical applications for what you might be able to do with these. Mainly the pan, zoom, and orbit. These others, you won't use them as much. I want you to forget about the software and focus on your work. So this is where hotkeys become really important. First, I'd like to talk to you about the pan tool. What's handy about the pan tool is if you have a set focus distance where your camera is focused away from the geometry that you're working on and you want to keep it there, but you want to move to the side because there might be some detail that's not exactly in your shot. Well, if you pan over, you keep your focal distance away from your geometry, and you might start to see details that aren't otherwise there, such as a house or, whatever it is you happen to be working on. Next up is the zoom tool. This is very handy as it is in Photoshop, where you can see details that you wouldn't otherwise see by zooming into your document. So you can see this cube isn't actually a cube, it has fillets on it. That isn't a detail I'd be able to see from far away. So being able to zoom in on a document and see those really fine details is, well, really handy. Likewise, you might notice that I'm using my zoom, my pan, and my orbit all in conjunction through hotkeys. And it's really allowing me to fluidly move through space. That's something worth noting, because eventually that's what you want to be able to do, is not have to think about what the zoom key is and what the pan key is, and be able to just really work on your document. Lastly is the orbit tool. So orbit is obviously very handy for being able to see all sides of your object, but it's also good for seeing details that you might not otherwise see. So at the bottom of this cube, we can see there's a little goblin guy underneath my cube that, well, I didn't really want him there, so I can go ahead now and delete him. And there's a little bit of detail here in the cube that I wasn't aware was there before. So using the orbit tool to be able to see those kind of details is actually really essential to being able to successfully complete a model and being able to see it from all sides. To review, the hotkeys that you really need to understand is that right-click will orbit, Shift and right-click will pan, and Control and right-click will zoom in and out by default. In Rhino, you can change around all of your hotkeys. I keep them the same just because, well, once I learn a software, I don't like to keep relearning it and reteaching it to myself. I'd rather just focus on my work. And if you ever forget what those hotkeys are, you can always go back to these top default buttons that are up here, and they will allow you to make the same moves. So what I want you to do is download the model that's underneath the video in the link below, and there will be a view saved called bottom corner. It'll look like this when you open up the file. And what you're going to do is zoom out, pan up, and zoom back in. And then zoom back out, pan down, and zoom back in. And just keep doing that until you get the feel for zooming and panning, and then start playing around with orbiting. I'll even keep the goblin in there. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.